It's a live at Five with Jeffrey. It's a live at Five with Jeffrey. I'm here. Are you with me? What? And welcome back to the studio. Here we are at the H2 Show Studios, live above the historic Adamson Square, which we've talked about every day since we've started. It is an amazing day. It is a beautiful day. Let's get a live look in here at the square so you can see it. Check it out with me. There it is. Not a lot of movement. A couple cars out there, but going to be a great week here in the City of Dreams, Carrollton, Georgia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, let me see what I can do here to get me back on the screen for you. We're going to look right here in the camera. I think I've gotten some of the colors tuned in, and we might just swerve the bend the corner. Whoa, just kidding. I'm not going to rap like that. But how about LeVar Ball being right about all his kids? He said they were all going to be successful, and they have been. Lonzo's back in the NBA and playing again despite the knee injury. LaMelo's doing well over there for Charlotte, and LiAngelo's got one of the most popular songs in the world. So there you go. It's on everybody's tongue. Let's get into the weekend. So it is February 3rd today. Yesterday was Groundhog Day. It feels like Groundhog Day all over again. Just kidding there. That's a shout out to the Bill Murray movie. Let's look at what happened on Groundhog Day. So I'm going to say it wrong, and my wife's going to laugh at me. Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow, so 6 more weeks of winter up there in Pennsylvania. And the one in Ohio did not see his shadow, so apparently they're going to have an early spring. And then here locally, General Beauregard Lee saw his shadow. So apparently in Georgia, we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter. Now, it's funny that we all joke about that and say that it's going to be 6 more weeks of winter. They have probably about a 39% accuracy rate. So just because the groundhog saw its shadow doesn't mean we're actually going to have 6 more weeks of winter. I just want to let everybody know, maybe it's not the best way to predict our weather, but it's still a lot of fun. And for a lot of folks, it's a bucket list event to go up there to Pennsylvania and watch it happen at Gobbler's Knob in Pennsylvania. All right, so the national day today is For Chaplains Day. What is For Chaplains Day? That was a question I said we would answer today, and so we can answer that question. On February 3rd each year, For Chaplains Day honors 4 military chaplains from World War II who sacrificed their lives for fellow service members. So chaplains in the military are an integral part of the service. They provide counseling, spiritual guidance, conduct services and religious rites, among other responsibilities, and serve all over the globe. If there's personnel there for the military, then there are chaplains there as well, serving in the same places that the military servicemen and women are. So during World War II, well, you know what? I'm going to tell a poem about the 4 chaplains that this is about here. I had that... to ChatGPT, and I said, hey, look, I think it'd be better if we honor these folks in a different way, a more artful way than just telling their story. So the inspirational poem that it came up with: on the icy seas the Dorchester sank. With men aboard their hearts sank blank. 4 souls stood strong when fear was near, their faith alight, their courage clear. Lieutenant Good, a Protestant brave, his prayers in calm they did not waive. Father Washington, a Catholic priest, offered peace through death, though death would not cease. Rabbi Polanski, with wisdom deep, spoke of faith, of vows to keep. And Methodist Chaplain Fox, steadfast, held hope afloat, his prayers vast. As the ship went down beneath the cold, they stood together, brave and bold. Hand in hand their voices rose, a final prayer as the darkness froze. No lifeboat came, no rescue near, but in their hearts no trace of fear. They gave their lives not for their own, but for those lost to bring them home. In the storm's fierce cry, they found their grace. Their love endured no time, no space. The 4 chaplains, a bond so pure, a legacy that will endure. So if you can't tell from that, the 4 chaplains were aboard a transport ship called the Dorchester. And then during their journey to Greenland, a U-boat hit them with a torpedo. And the 4 chaplains prayed with folks, handed out life jackets, and made sure that other service members made it onto the lifeboats. And they went down with the ship, of course, praying as they went down. They prayed with others throughout the event. Of the 900 servicemen and women that were on, or 904 service members that were on board, only 230 were rescued from the waters. Congress awarded the 4 chaplains the 4 Chaplains Medal in 1960, and now we observe February 3rd as 4 Chaplains Day to celebrate or to remember them and observe the day. You can read No Greater Glory, the 4 Immortal Chaplains in the Sinking of the Dorchester in World War II by Dan Kuzman, or Sea of Glory by Ken Wells. So I think it's important we remember those things, and I think it's important we remember history when we can. Part of the reason I say that is oftentimes history is lost, and we do not remember those people that were able to sacrifice or were willing to sacrifice their lives for what was a great battle in World War II. Even the simplest thing of praying with service members can make a huge difference in morale and in our ability to win. We've always talked about the indomitable human spirit here on the H2 show, and that was just another example of it. They believed in a higher calling and a higher power, and were willing to sacrifice their own lives to try to save others. So remember 4 Chaplains Day today. So let's go now to take a little trip to this day in history. Okay, in this day in history, a 4-hour peace conference in 1865 occurred between President Abraham Lincoln and Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens at Hampton Road, Virginia. Ultimately, the meeting was unsuccessful, and they were not able to come to an armistice between the Confederates and the Union, and the Union was not willing to relent unless they acknowledged the federal authority from the Confederates. In 1870, the 15th Amendment to the Constitution was passed. So this is just after the Civil War. It's one of the Reconstruction Amendments. The 15th Amendment is included in 3 amendments made in the Reconstruction Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified just after the Civil War. The amendments aim to protect the voting rights of all citizens, regardless of race and color. It also protected the voting rights of the freed slaves, as permitted by the 13th Amendment. The said amendment was ratified on February 3rd, 1870. Okay, now I'm going to hit one that's a little more controversial. In 1913, U.S. starts the income tax. That's a federal income tax. Amendment 16 to the Constitution was ratified on February 3rd, 1913, and it granted the Congress the authority to issue an income tax without having to determine it based on population. So one of the interesting things here, and we've seen debates happening right now. A lot of folks will tell you that we should dismiss tariffs offhand as not an effective taxing strategy or not an effective way to gain revenue for the federal government. I will tell you that this argument has been going on since the 1800s. This act of 1913, the amendment that was passed, was paired in part with a Revenue Act of 1913, also known as the Tariff Act of 1913, or the Underwood Tariff or the Underwood-Simmons Act. So it reestablished federal income tax in the United States and subsequently lowered the tariff rate. So what does that tell you? Just offhand, that should tell you that at a time in U.S. history, tariffs were the main way that the federal government collected revenue. In 1913, or one of the main ways that they collected revenue. In 1913, there was a raging debate on whether or not we should have a federal income tax. So to think about it now and say, has the federal government become too big? Have we allowed it to stretch too far? What were the fears that were discussed back in 1913? So in 1913, there was a limit set on federal income taxes that only individuals that made $3,000 or more a year would be taxed. We know that all to be completely untrue now, right? Everybody is taxed. There was also a fear that they would go from the 1% tax that was proposed to a 10% tax. We all know that the minimum tax that people are taxed on their money today is greater than that 1%. So my point is simply understand that history often repeats itself. One, this is all cyclical. It doesn't technically repeat itself. There's just echoes of history in present day. Two, remember that they can tell you that ideas are completely radical and dismiss them offhand, just throw them out immediately, when in fact, historically, those ideas were commonplace. So having tariffs, while economically there are questions as to how effective they can be because other people can tariff you back, and how can they bring you, back into trade balance and other things, there's certainly valid questions on both sides of that. But the point is that there are valid questions, and that it's okay to discuss, hey, is our income tax system too heavy of a burden on its citizens? Should we be cutting our federal spending? These are valid conversations and things that should not be dismissed, and we should not say that there is no room for discussion on them. Our point on the H2 show is always have a discussion. The point of having a second chair of Brent coming up here and us talking back and forth is not for us to just agree with each other. The point is for us to have a discussion about events and things that are going on. For example, I think that there's a potential for crypto to have some purpose in our lives. Brent thinks that crypto is likely, without other analysis, could be completely scammy. So me and him have a differing opinion, but we're open to hear each other out on it. What I say to you, hear out your fellow citizen, whoever they are. Hear them out. Have a rational brain. Have a rational discussion. Have a close friend. He's told me, hey, that is the number one thing we can do, is have a good discourse between people, and that we care more about our family, our friends, our neighborhood. I will not dismiss you because of whatever political opinion you have. We love you. We want to see the best for you. So that means that you have to have openness about you and the ability to have these discussions. So don't dismiss the tariff versus internal revenue service, external revenue service, whatever you want to call it. Don't dismiss it without first reading about it and understanding it. So there were fears in the past, and Woodrow Wilson was the president at this time, that they would continue to increase the amount of tax that they took from you, and that the federal government would continue to get bigger. And I would say that those fears have been proven valid over the years. So while that is a controversial subject, it's one that I don't think can be ignored. Let's move on to some celebrity birthdays. So today we have Amal Clooney, George Clooney's wife. We have Blythe Danner, Brandon Michael Hall, Daddy Yankee, Frank Tarkenton, Isla Fisher. This one, the only thing I can remember every time I see Isla Fisher is from Wedding Crashers, when I believe it was Vince Vaughn says he has a stage 5 virgin clinger or whatever it is, or leave me in the trenches taking hand grenades. All the great quotes from Wedding Crashers. She was in a bunch of other movies, but that was the one that I remember her the most from. Matrice Berg and Mana Tierney. So happy birthday to all of them. Let's transition to some national news. So I told you I would give you an update as soon as we knew something on the Black Hawk crash. So it does appear as if the Black Hawk helicopter was above its flight ceiling based on preliminary information from the black box. So the flight ceiling for that helicopter was 200 feet. It appeared that it was somewhere around 350 to 400 feet in the air, which put it in the path of the oncoming jet there. So not a good thing, obviously. I listened to another video, again, from a pilot. The pilot was breaking down that he thought that the helicopter had heard from the tower and was told to have visual separation from the plane. So the helicopter accepted visual separation as its protocol, and the assumption from that pilot that was watching it, and just his opinion, was that the helicopter was mistaken in identifying the plane. It thought the plane that was behind this plane that ended up impacting the helicopter was a different plane. And so essentially in a crowded airspace with lots of light infiltration and obstruction and multiple planes obviously coming through, just a tragic accident that they couldn't maintain that visual separation. More evidence may come out, more information might come out. It was also shown that the plane did try to pull up at the last minute or adjust its flight path, but was unable to do so. The recovery of the bodies continues as they try to make sure they can identify everyone that was on board, both the helicopter and the plane. Another tragic accident happened in Philadelphia, also a plane accident. What occurred there appears to be a stall, but again, we do not have all the information yet. But it was a medevac plane of a Learjet, about approximately a minute to 2 minutes off after takeoff. There's Ring video doorbell evidence showing it fall basically out of the sky. The reason it's assumed that it was a stall is that it fell at such a steep angle that would be the only thing they could imagine was the cause of that accident. It was very tragic, and again, we do pray for the families there, but just reporting the news to you here. All right. And then we'll go on to tariffs, something that we just talked about, but we'll talk a little bit more about here. So what we're seeing in the stock market, and I'm going to bring it up because it's been a little bit scary, I think, for a lot of people, has been there over the past couple of days after tariffs were announced on Canada and Mexico. There were counter tariffs basically announced from Canada and Mexico that would impact the U.S. trade as well. And so because of that, we've seen the stock market and the crypto world really take notice, and some of these have sold off. Bitcoin is now testing the 95,000 level. The SPY was down in pre-market around 1.3%. So we'll see what of those hold. But essentially, Canada has said, hey, if you're going to put a 25% tariff on us, then we're going to put a counter tariff on you, and we're not going to purchase certain U.S. goods, or we're going to purchase less of certain U.S. goods. I believe it's essentially $450 billion that we buy versus $400 billion that they buy. It's pretty close in terms of the number. The Canadian Prime Minister is going to make his tariffs go into effect, I believe, 25 days from now versus President Trump's tariffs going into effect on Tuesday. So when we look at these things, how do they impact us? One, there is the view that some of your goods are going to go up in price. If they're coming from Canada, they're coming from Mexico, they certainly could have an increase in price. The other view is that you could see an impact to your stock market portfolio, whether it be your 401k or it be a personal discretionary account. What I'd suggest is do not panic in this time. This is not financial advice. It's just what I will do. I'm not going to panic. We're going to take a reasonable approach to life. We're going to keep our eye to it, but we're not going to panic and sell everything or any of those sorts of things. The markets go up and down on this type of news, and there's no need to monitor it minute to minute when the markets aren't even open. As the markets open, you'll get a better feel for it. In the night, they were closer to 3% down. Now they're at 1.3% down. So if you looked at it at 8 o'clock last night, the futures looked horrible. If you look at it now, they look a little less horrible. So let's let it play out. Let's see what happens. But let's all have a even keel about any of the decisions we're going to make personally and professionally about these. Plan for the worst, but hope for the best. All right. Moving to the other article I wanted to talk to y'all about in national news. We already did the Blackhawk crash update. Let's go to sports. So in the world of sports, One of the things that we've noticed this year is about a 53% reduction in the people that watch the NBA. I'm not sure why the viewership is down so much. There's arguments that, hey, you're competing with the college football because college football playoff is extended so far into February. There's arguments that the NFL has really just surpassed the NBA in terms of the quality of product. And then there's conversations around, hey, the 3-point shot and all these people just chunking threes and not actually hitting shots. And then the refs are getting more involved in the games, and that all of these things are having a huge impact on the viewership of the NBA. That said, one thing that's going to create a very, interested group of people, even outside of the NBA, general watcher, the one that's got NBA League Pass and is really just honed in watching the games, is great big news about trades. And the big one this weekend was the Lakers getting Luka Doncic. So Luka is 25, about to be 26, or just turned 26 years old. Usually when you trade a 26-year-old player in the NBA, they're in their prime. And if they have not requested a trade, you're typically expecting 5, 6, 7, sometimes even 8 first-round picks going back the other way, or pick swaps, or up-and-coming prospects and good players. But this was really a 26-year-old in their prime, Luka, and going to the Lakers with a couple of players thrown in there for salary cap purposes, Maxi Kleber and one other player that escapes me in the moment. And then coming back was Anthony Davis and 1 first-round pick, and I think it's Max Christie. So a lot of folks are giving the Dallas Mavericks an F on this trade grade here. The Mavericks have spun the story that they made this trade because of concerns around Luka's conditioning. Now, Luka does tend to come into camp kind of heavy. He loves to drink beer. There's a funny video from last year's Western Conference Finals of, I forget which coach it was. I think it may have been, it wasn't Chauncey Billups, but his coach taking a beer out of his hand right after the game. Now, far be it for me to judge a professional athlete's diet and choice of drink, but I don't know that I would be, drinking full weight beers, when I had to play in the NBA Finals in, a few nights. So maybe there's valid concerns around his conditioning. He does tend to have a kind of injury history. He does end up usually getting about 2 or 3 weeks off in the middle of the season to kind of get his conditioning under control. But trading somebody in their prime for a north side of 30 player, even an all NBA defensive player, no disparaging remarks here against Anthony Davis, but it does seem that there's a lot of value going out and not as much value coming back for the Dallas Mavericks. So it really shocked the NBA world. They thought that the gentleman who reported it had been hacked, and that this was fake. This was fake news. And in the world of AI, I kind of understand why they thought that. But very, very shocking news there. And then last night, late last night, I got a little, blurb or article about a trade that happened with the San Antonio Spurs. So the Spurs are now getting De'Aaron Fox to pair with Victor Wembanyama. So that should be a very interesting pairing. Right now they do not have very many players that get into the paint. De'Aaron Fox is one of the fastest players in the NBA with the ball in his hand, and has a lot of good stats about him getting to the paint. So should see a very interesting next few years out of the San Antonio Spurs. With all that said, I haven't watched much NBA this year. I think I've maybe watched 5-10 minutes. I know the Hawks are 2-8 in the last 10 games, but I think there's a big transition period happening right now with sports and with the NBA. All right, moving on. We'll go to a little live look in for you while I transition. Let's go back here. One thing I'm very interested in was the Royal Rumble. So I don't know if anybody is still into wrestling like I am, but very interesting stuff happening in the Royal Rumble last night, or on Saturday rather. And It's interesting. You can watch it on Peacock, the Royal Rumble, but the Raw is War is now on Netflix. I'm very confused. I don't watch wrestling like I used to. I'm not watching it every Monday and every Friday, and I'm not watching NXT and every pay per view or paid live event, however they're calling it nowadays. Um, I'm not doing that anymore. So it's real tough for me as a viewer to keep up with where to watch. Before, I was watching it on TikTok with other people. So there'd be a guy on one side that's talking about it, and then I'd be watching the event on the right hand side or whatever, or top and bottom. So very confusing as a viewer to try to keep up with where everything's going with all the shifting paid TV models that are going on and streaming. And it does feel like you're paying more than you used to pay for cable with all the streaming if you want to watch every show that you enjoy. So there's a lot of good TV out there. It's just not on broadcast television. So anyway, back to the Royal Rumble. As those people that are fans of the 90s and early 2000s WWE or WWF, as we called it back then, that would be me. Count me among those. John Cena is on his last ride. So he had appeared in the Royal Rumble, made it all the way to the end, and was ultimately eliminated by Jey Uso, main event Jey Uso, as they call him. And Jey will be competing at WrestleMania. So we will not be getting John Cena, at least in the traditional sense of him in the WrestleMania match, because he won the main event of WrestleMania because he won the Royal Rumble. There may be some other way they work him in, but that's not going to be how he goes out. On the women's side, Charlotte Flair is back. Alexis Bliss is back. Alexis? I can't remember. She's back. She was celebrating one of her friends, Bray Wyatt, who passed a couple of years ago, kind of unexpectedly, with her outfit. It said Fiend with an R in it. Fiend is forever. So the Fiend was a character famously made by Bray Wyatt. He also wrote Alexis Bliss's character as she went off into this real creepy doll house horror film type character. And also Uncle Howdy is another one that's a famous character that he kind of wrote, Uncle Howdy's whole family. So if you're into wrestling, it was a great night. There were some botches. There were some rough spots in the pay-per-view. You had a pretty good ladder match between Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens. That was pretty cool. A lot of good spots there, in my opinion. We'll see what the rest of the wrestling world thinks. But that's enough about wrestling because I know it's not the hottest topic for everybody. Moving on to the UFC. So the UFC had a fight night in, where was it? Trying to look up what location it was in. I think it was in the Middle East because it was early in the day, which they tend to do. They also had Shara Magomedov, and he can only fight outside of the U.S. because he has an eye issue. So the two big fights there were Michael Page and Shara Magomedov were fighting. Kind of a back and forth. Michael Venom Page has a really weird fighting style, karate style. Hard to approach, hard to hit fighting style. So there were some big moments for him in the fight. Shara's biggest moments were in the clinch. Not a lot of clean shots were landed, a couple leg kicks, that sort of thing. But ultimately, MVP ended up winning that fight. The big one that was kind of a shocker, and the reason why I brought this up was Nasruddin Imhoff beat Israel Adesanya in the second round by TKO. So that one really was the upset of the night. Israel Adesanya was a undefeated champion for a long time, or had one loss. I can't remember if it was undefeated or one loss, but defended the middleweight belt quite a few times. Middleweight or welterweight? Middleweight. Yeah, middleweight belt. Quite a few times, was really kind of on a run that was historic, and ultimately ended up losing to Sean Strickland, which was really unexpected. Turned around, fought again, and lost again to Dricus du Plessis, also unexpected, and then now loses again. So in the last 4 out of his last 5 fights, he's lost. So Going to be interesting to see how he responds, and it seems to be just weird ways to lose. He'll switch stances in an odd spot and get caught and clipped and end up getting knocked out. So kind of a crazy thing. All right, move it on to local news. In local news, we talked about House Bill 581, the homestead exemption. The city of Carrollton has chosen to, or has shown an intent to opt out of the homestead exemption, but as part of the rules, they have to let us all have our say. So all concerned citizens are invited to the public hearing on this matter to be held in the first floor courtroom of the Public Safety Annex, 115 West Center Street, Carrollton, Georgia, on Thursday, February 6th, 2025 at 1 p.m. Additional public hearings have already been decided as well. Same place on Thursday, February 13th at 5 p.m. So you'll have a 1 p.m. and a 5 p.m. A less generous person would say that they do that so that, you can't be heard, or people might forget, or people may be at work, or so on and so forth. But I will say that it give you a 1 p.m. and a 5 p.m. So there is a chance for, people to come at lunch or people to be heard right after work. So I'll say it and be as generous as possible. I think they do care about your voice here in Carrollton. I know that sometimes they're going to do it anyway. So in this case, they've already kind of made the decision. They're going to opt out of the homestead exemption bill. That said, you should go and have your voices heard. Your city council and your mayor do care about you. There are members there that will hear what you say, and they will try to take what you say into a compromise in the future. So it may not impact what they do right now with this House Bill 581, but it could have a positive impact for the future. So please take advantage of the opportunity to make your voice heard. If you feel strongly about this House Bill 581, the homestead exemption, and pegging that to the inflation rate, then please go and make your voice heard. Okay? Well, it's a sad, sad moment. I think we've come to the point where, it's our time to conclude the day. I do want to say I'm excited for this week. I'm excited for this month. I told my son the other day that he said, I'm so glad that I got 2 great teachers so far in my school, getting picked for different classrooms and whatnot. And I said, you can be sure that you'll never have a bad teacher. And the way you do that is by your mindset. And I know I'm just as guilty as anybody, as and others and all around. We're all guilty. We're going to have positive and negative self-talk. We're going to do that. However, one of the things we can do is try to keep perspective. We can pull back. We can say, is this really the most important thing to me? Does this really matter? And when we do that, we can get some perspective. I was taking my daughter out before the daddy-daughter dance. As I sat there and watched her we were at Olive Garden. She's got her little kids menu. And I say little kids menu because I'm trying to make her still be a little kid. But beside the point, she's looking for the differences or trying to find the breadsticks or whatever it was. And she's missing one I can see very clearly. And I thought to myself, this is a perfect view of life. She couldn't see it from her first-person perspective. But me as a third person sitting across the table, I had a bigger view, a wider view. I could take a less zoomed-in view of what was going on. We should all try to do that every day, whether that's finding a respected mentor or a friend that can help us get perspective in a moment, not one that's just going to gas us up and tell us we're right and tell us we're doing all the right things. And yeah, there's the need for the rah-rah speech, but somebody we truly trust to give us some real advice and say, hey, pause. You may be wrong here. Let me help you. That is more valuable if you can find the person that does that and does it well. That can be your significant other. That can be your best friend. That can just be a mentor at work. And it can be all three, depending on what the subject is or what have you. So find that for yourself. We call that a tribe. Find your tribe. Find your village. They'll help you with your kids. They'll help you with your understanding what your interpersonal feelings. They'll help you in your business. Those things are very important. And with that, let's go to the scripture of the day, and let's leave again remembering I love you. The H2 Show loves you. God loves you. Whether you're a believer or not, I want you to take something positive from this show. I hope we made you laugh a little bit. Today, I gave you some heartfelt stories about the 4 chaplains. Keep that in memory and know that you can be of service. Whether you're a service member, officially carrying a gun or whatever it may be, like the infantry people, or you're a chaplain, you can be of service right now in your community, in your place of work, or in a place of worship. You can be of service. So look for those opportunities. So let's go here to the verse of the day. From James 1:17 from the King James Version. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of light, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. So what that's saying is, all good things come from God. The love that you're able to share, all that comes from God. And so please go forth, share that light, share it with someone else. Be somebody's reason for taking that next step. You're born to do hard things. You're going to do hard things. You're good at it. I believe in you. Remember, taking that first step, you woke up this morning. That's something. Now let's get after it. Have a great, great day. And thank you for joining me.